Okay, so we are live. Wow, that is a crooked camera. So I'm not gonna fix it. It's fine. Um, Today is gonna be pretty laid back. I want to do kind of maybe once a month a community choice. It's kind of like an ask me anything, but it's not really about me necessarily, and it can be about anything, but I want to just leave it up to you guys about what we are going to talk about. I do have a stream coming up soon on uh, Gödel's incompleteness theorem and also um, uh, gauge theory, but I am preparing a bit more for that. Money, we're going to talk about a lot. uh, Eric Weinstein has been suggesting that gauge theory is what we should be using for economics. Um, and I've been looking a lot into that. I kind of want to discuss it. I'm just checking the sound here. Should be live. Perfect. We're good. Okay. So we are going to discuss anything, but there's a few things that I wanted to, discuss until there's something else that you guys want to bring up. But I want to talk about uh, prime numbers, and then I want to go through the models that are going to be in my paper. And I thought about like how transparent should the construction of this be. I thought about honestly like writing it on the stream live with you guys watching and commenting and helping. And I might do that at some point pretty soon. So once I just get it a little bit more, I guess, I guess just completed, I guess. But it's pretty complete. Like it's really coming along. My goal is to be able to show you guys version one of the paper by the end of the year, which is not far away at all. And it is a lot of work. It is really hard to write this paper. I talked about this before. Um, it's like writing a paper on the theory of everything is not the only. It cannot be the only way to present a theory because there has to be dynamic models involved. So part of me feels like this is just kind of almost. It's not going through the motions, but it is in some ways, but it also is, it's very useful to people who want something static that they can reference that's not concrete, but that isn't just a live stream. I mean, I do have videos that are not just live streams that are basically at the beginning of this channel that are overviews on the work, but it has come quite a ways since then. But the basic models since then are almost unchanged in how they work. It's just how much I have learned has has seriously progressed. But I do have a theory on the aliens, not aliens, but extraterrestrials or whatever these things are, to share with you guys about, because I've been wondering like where are these things? I know I bring it up every now and then, but this is the most important. It is the most interesting development going on right now. I mean, and that's saying a lot because there's a lot happening in the world. Some of it is not as interesting as it's made out to be. Some of it is far more interesting than it's made out to be. But the most interesting one is definitely the acknowledgement of craft from another civilization and or beings from another civilization. But I, I've said before, I don't think they're from another planet. I just don't. But it doesn't make sense with my model. Doesn't mean it's not possible. It just doesn't make sense with my model. Um, they're probably from a previous aeon or they are from a previous civilization. But I basically think that they are people that have messed with their genes and have gone further down the path to eusocial to towards a eusocial society. And eusocial is something objective. About a year ago, I was making the claim that human beings are eusocial. And the reality is that we're not. We are becoming eusocial, but we are not yet eusocial. And I was thinking about this the other day. Like, what is the objective defining line that divides a eusocial group from a non-eusocial group? And there has to be an objective line, or at least I would think there is. And it's a gnat. But I'm pretty sure there is. And what it is it is centralization of reproduction. That's what it is. I used to think that we humans, instead of reproduction being centralized, it would be information being centralized. And I still think that that might happen to us, but we are on our way, I do believe, to centralization of reproduction. And I mean, this kind of got into a deeper discussion than I was expecting for this topic, but uh, the fact that human beings right now can reproduce without a centralized, queen, essentially, uh, makes them not eusocial. But we are on our way to being eusocial. We are developing a caste system. It's not something that we write into laws necessarily. It's a combination of laws, but and also nature. I mean, we are just developing castes. That's just a fact. But we are naked, which is a sign of a eusocial creature, because if you're naked, then you can see each other's bodies, and appearing sexy makes you valuable to the group, which means you're worthy of being protected and looked after and cared for, which makes being sexy more valuable than having a thick coat to protect you against the elements, because you also, in every eusocial structure, you make your own living spaces. Bees make hives, wasps make nests. My dog. Ants have ant hills that are filled with tunnels, and I'm pretty sure that these beings that are responsible for the UFO phenomenon are eusocial, and they have a centralized reproduction system. They are by necessity, I think, and I think that they are underground. It's so funny. I used to work for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and or Anthem Blue Cross. It's one of the biggest insurance companies in the world, and their head of paid marketing was like my contact at Anthem, and so I would run their marketing and through an agency, and they had a guy who basically told me what Anthem wanted, and so that guy used to talk about how there were extraterrestrials in tunnels south of Riverside, California. And we used to laugh hysterically at this, because he would say it like it was like nothing. He'd be like, oh yeah, like they're just over there in those tunnels underneath those hills just south of Riverside. And it was like he didn't even realize that we found this amusing. And we would ask him all these questions, and it was just like, what the reason why it was so entertaining to me is not what he was saying, but the fact that he was saying it so nonchalantly and just, I don't know, uh, casually. And also, I knew that he was a very competent person because I worked with him. So I knew he wasn't just like some crazy person who was detached from reality. But this, what he was telling me, made no sense. And I'm not saying that he's correct. It's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that I'm pretty sure that the extraterrestrials are hiding in tunnels underneath the ground. I don't know where. I don't know if it's in tunnels south of Riverside, but um, I think that they're underground. And the reason why is because all eusocial species make their own homes. They either make hives or wasps, nests, like paper wasps make like a nest. Bees make a hive. Humans make skyscrapers. Ants dig holes. And naked mole rats dig holes underground. And if you can dig efficiently, it makes no sense to build up when you could just dig down. It's much more efficient. The energy costs are like, I mean, much, much less. It stays at a certain depth. It stays pretty much constant temperature depending on where you are, but throughout the year. So you don't even need air conditioning and climate control, or at least to the degree that we do in skyscrapers and things like that. You know how much it probably costs to air condition a skyscraper in Phoenix, Arizona, or LA? It's got to be obscene. And when you could just dig down, and I know because I study reptiles in both of those places, if you go, 2 inches down in LA, it's a constant temperature year round, basically. If you go, 2 feet down in Arizona, it's a constant temperature. So it is different, but it still doesn't take much to get to a very comfortable environment. And we also don't see them around. Like, where are their buildings? Like, they're flying around in these craft. I don't think that they are at another planet. So where are they? It's like they keep going in and out of the ocean. Maybe because they're accessing underneath the ground through the ocean. I don't know. One of my mentors in biologist, world famous, brilliant, world famous herpetologist, who is my mentor in life and also animals and biology, ecology. He told me one time he was in Kingman, Arizona, and he saw a UFO. And he's not somebody who ever talks about this. He's not like a UFO guy or anything. And I have become fascinated by this topic, but I am not a UFO person either. I've never been a UFO person or an alien person or anything. I was interested, like I've said before, in Area 51 because I like planes. Like, I like the Blackbird and stealth, projects and things like that. And that was my introduction to this years ago via finding out about Bob Lazar. But I stopped thinking about this and had cognitive dissonance for probably like 10 years, where I just was like, yeah, I believe Bob Lazar, but I also believe in the Fermi paradox. So, which doesn't really make sense with that worldview at the time. Still believe in the Fermi paradox, but it's complicated. Like I said, I don't think they're from another planet in outer space. But I do think that they're here. I mean, it seems like, I know they're here. We'll talk more. I mean, I saw them. I videotaped the craft and I put it on my YouTube channel. It's like a couple months ago. And also other things that I will talk about eventually on a stream dedicated to this topic. But I mean, I videotaped, one UFO, but there were two. And the first one disappeared before I got my phone out. So, I mean, I've seen the phenomenon, and it was the first time I'd ever seen, a UFO, I guess, or meaning like a craft. UFO meaning like some type of anti-gravity type of craft, whatever that means, anti-gravity. And flying saucer. That's what we could call it, but I don't think they're all saucer shaped. But uh, I think they're underground. I think that guy was right, who was like that, the old head of marketing for Anthem Blue Cross. And that guy had an important job. Like, that was a huge company, and uh, he was like a hippie dude, but he was totally. I mean, that is not the position that you give to somebody who is incompetent, and I knew he wasn't incompetent. Um, and it made no sense that he just believed in this. But I don't know what he knew. He might have just been way more. The UFO community, it seems, and which I have not been a part of ever, and I have not even. There's only one ufologist who I listen to on a regular basis, and that's only a new development. That's like within the past year, like less than a year, and that's Richard Dolan. Highly recommend his channel, but I don't know, definitely less than a year, probably close to a year maybe. I've listened to him at this point, maybe more than 6 months, but I mean, from what I've learned from him, this community has known a lot for a while and has just been branded kooks. So that's very possible that that guy was just, he knew what the UFO community has known for a while, and everybody has said, you can't know that, you can't know that. It's like, well, they did, apparently, because now the government is admitting things. But point being, pretty sure these beings are eusocial. They can't have children on their own. They have a centralized reproduction system of some type. I do think we're actually involved in that, but we'll save that for another stream. But I've said before, I think it's inevitable. Like, if you look at humanity, our sperm count is dropping. We're about to have a population collapse. We're not going to have overpopulation. It's the opposite. We're going to be like dying out in the next 20 years. People are reproducing at below replacement rate. It does not look like it's going up. It seems like it's going down from what I understand. That combined with all these other issues that we have currently been experiencing with, the state of the world, viruses, treatments, things that could potentially impact us and our reproduction going forward. And then I really do believe that CRISPR is going to it's going to screw up our ability to reproduce. You can't just change your genes to whatever you want and continue to reproduce. If that was the case, you could breed with like a parrot, and you can't. You can't even breed with, other mammals. And I don't even think human beings could reproduce with a chimp. And their DNA is very close to ours. And it would not have to be nearly as far from us as a chimp is in order to destroy the ability to reproduce. What's going to happen is we're going to change genes outside artificially, so it's going to have an even bigger impact. This is going to introduce out of context information, which means it's going to turn information into non-information, basically erasing information. And I'm not positive on this. It's like, I'm confident, but I'm not positive. I hope I'm wrong. And this is going to make it so that there isn't coherence of information. It's not possible to have coherence of information. And when you're basically stitching DNA together, and when you have misalignments in genes, like I've said before, my wife and I had a miscarriage, and it was when that happens, an early one like that, uh, it's called like a blighted ovum sometimes. That occurs because there's some type of genetic misalignment often. That doesn't mean it's not genetic from the parents. It just has to do with when things were being put together. It doesn't have any bearing on whether or not you can have another kid. Um, and it's not like a disorder, like a recessive disorder or something. And uh, that means that your body recognizes when there's something genetically off. And I don't know what that would be, and we have no idea how much change would cause your body to do this. It could be almost nothing. It could be that those girls who are the little Chinese girls who were edited with CRISPR a couple years ago. We'll look it up in a minute. They could be infertile, or their kids could be infertile, or their grandkids could be infertile, or could just have difficulty having children. Um, and it's already difficult enough. I mean, we're waiting longer than ever. It's much easier to get pregnant at like 18 than it is at like 30. And I'm not saying it's hard at 30, it depends, but it's much easier at 18 than it is at 30. And we're waiting till 30, and not everybody is having kids. Those that do have much less than before, and sperm count is plummeting. And miscarriage is skyrocketing. It's like this is all before CRISPR, guys. We're going to have to centralize, I think, at some point, reproduction. I think that in vitro, like in vitro fertilization, and assisted, fertility treatments and things like that, that is the beginning of a centralized reproduction system. It's just the beginning. It's not there yet, but it's the beginning. It is the reliance on infrastructure, on colony infrastructure for the sake of reproduction. And I'm not saying we'll have a queen that's just pumping out babies. That's not what it's going to be. But we'll have that's at least it's not human. But we'll have to, I think, centralize reproduction, and it'll have to be assisted and through science and cloning and whatever, because we're going to destroy our genes before we realize that we've destroyed our genes. And I don't think there's any going back that we can fix. I mean, the world will be set right, and then that won't be an issue anymore, I don't think. But there needs to be coherence of information, which means that if we destroy coherence of information on our level, that means that, and we have destroyed our ability to go from the bottom up, basically, of uniting the fiber bundle, essentially. So there's a fiber bundle, and it's got a double helix of information, self-referencing information chain, basically, going through the center of it. It's like a hot vibration, and the center is a double helix. And you're destroying the ability to go from the inside out to push information forwards and maintain coherence, at least genetically, from the inside out. You would need a system to come from the outside in to see where we are screwed up, and then go and like create information coherence from the outside in, basically, via external changes. So, and that's the only way also to fix it, because from within the system you can't see the result of every information interaction, essentially. So if you change this gene, and then it changes that gene, and that changes that gene, and that gene, and that gene, and it just goes on. You can't see that endpoint from within the system before you change that. Before you hit that first domino, you will not see where the last domino is that gets hit in that information chain of DNA. So you'll need somebody who's basically got like a God's eye view, literally, um, like a cosmological verse, um, or like a messianic consciousness, and a or even you could call it like a, I mean, superintelligence, technological superintelligence, to fix this because they need to be able to see from the outside in, basically. You need a structure that can see the entanglement relationships of all the relevant interactions in the entanglement substructure of reality, which something linked to a quantum computer could do. But we are a quantum computer, but we don't have all the senses to do it. Like, you would need literally like an outside in view. Anyways, rant over, but ETs are probably hiding underground, and they're probably from not outer space. Um, so here, that's like not a not a light conversation. Actually, it either sounds insane if you don't know what's going on with like disclosure, I guess, as people call it. Um, and if you don't know what's going on with genetics and CRISPR and things like that, it seems like an insane conversation. But if you do, then it's a very heavy conversation. So it's not as light as planning. But it's also the first day back, and uh, it's not the most active chat today, but that's fine. The day that it's the community choice. Um, okay, so I want to actually look into what happened to uh, these Chinese baby girls, CRISPR Chinese twins. Okay, so the twins, Lulu and Nana, reportedly had their genes modified before birth by a Chinese scientific team using a new editing tool, CRISPR. The goal was to make the girls immune to infection by HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. HIV requires CCR5 gene to enter human blood cells. I also have heard that they are expecting to give them that it gave them an IQ boost as well. And this can happen. I mean, Tay-Sachs disease, which is a disease, it's a recessive genetic disorder common in like Ashkenazi Jews like me, but I don't carry it. My parents were both tested. Ashkenazi Jews are often tested for this virus because if both the parents have it, there's a 1 in 4 chance that your child is homozygous for the virus, which means that they will die very young and be really messed up. But you can carry it, and if you are a carrier, if you're heterozygous for Tay-Sachs, it actually gives you a boost in IQ. And like I said, I don't have it. Neither of my parents carry it, so I don't need to even get tested because I can't. But I can't carry it. But it's pretty common in certain European Jewish communities, and it is selected for in those communities almost unconsciously because if you carrier of it, it makes you more intelligent. But there is one gnat. I don't live. My office has like what's called vivariums everywhere, if you don't know this. And they're breeding like endangered gecko species, and they're just little mini jungles over there. And every now and then there's a gnat that gets out of one of those cages. But it's because it's selected for, it ends up not dying out because even though the homozygous form of it is deadly and tragic, like tragic. Um, the heterozygous form is a benefit. This is also true of sickle cell. So sickle cell anemia in African populations, the uh, can while it has medical complications uh, itself, it also protects helps protect against malaria. So it doesn't die out because even though it has issues associated with it, it also has benefits. And I think that the heterozygous form is the one where it helps you resist malaria. So, let's see here. Sickle cell. Yep. People develop sickle cell disease, a condition in which red blood cells are abnormally shaped. If they inherit two faulty copies of the gene, meaning they're homozygous for the gene, uh, for the oxygen carrying protein hemoglobin, that's when they would have sickle cell. The faulty gene persists because even carrying one copy of it confers some resistance to malaria. Yep. People with sickle cell trait are less likely to get malaria. The trait does not completely protect a person from infection, but makes death from malaria less likely. So there is an incentive to it as well. So, interesting. I think that this is what there's some aspect of this to this CRISPR uh, editing that they did to these baby girls. I'm pretty sure it boosted their IQ. But they made them immune to AIDS or to HIV. There is no evidence that he actually set out to modify the twins' intelligence. Okay, yeah, right here. The experiment has been widely condemned as irresponsible, and the scientist, I don't know how to pronounce his name, is under investigation in China. News for the first gene-edited babies also inflames speculation about whether CRISPR technology could one day be used to create super intelligent humans. Oh, like extraterrestrials with giant heads or something like that. Perhaps as part of a biotechnology race between the US and China. There is no evidence that he actually set out to. I think the guy's name is he or he. Yeah, it's funny because it's like he, but not. There is no evidence that he or we could just call it he, even if that's not how you pronounce his name. It still works. Actually set out to modify the twins' intelligence. MIT Technology Review contacted scientists studying the effects of CCR5 on cognition, and they say that the Chinese scientist never reached out to them as he did to others from whom he hoped to get scientific evidence or support. As far as I know, we never heard from him. Okay. The Chinese scientist was certainly aware of the link between CCR5 and cognition. It was first shown in 2016 by Zhao and Silva, who found that removing the gene from mice significantly improved their memory. The team had looked at more than 140 different genetic alterations to find which made mice smarter. So they basically made genetically altered little girls who are immune to AIDS and are smarter than normal. And this, though, could have serious problems in the future. Because it could lead to this. Children of men. Children of Men explores the themes of hope and faith in the face of overwhelming futility and despair. The film's source, P.D. James' novel The Children of Men, 1992, describes what happens when society is unable to reproduce, using male infertility to explain the problem. In the movie, it's women who are infertile. In the book, it's men. And in reality, it'll be both. Probably women, honestly. It looks like it's going to be men because sperm count is dropping, but it's probably going to be women if it's due to gene editing. Dystopian novel by English writer P.D. James. Set in England in 2021. Interesting. Centers on the results of mass infertility. It's a scary, scary story. In 1994, the sperm count of human males plummeted to zero. A feminist civil war broke out, and mankind now faces imminent extinction. The last people to be born are now called Omegas, a race apart they enjoy various prerogatives. Interesting. They never explain in the movie what causes it. The cause or source of the infertility is never explained in the movie. Very likely unknown. Okay. Hmm. Yeah, no, it never says it. Hmm. Okay. But yeah, I think this is in our future. I'm not saying it goes totally. I don't think it will, but I think we're gonna start to witness like the results, uh, the results of our actions. Um, but I do think that the universe, God saves us, and it will be fine. But it also, we will start down that road. But I think that the ETs are already there. I think that they, it's funny. The government told Bob Lazar that, and I don't know how they know this, but, or even if it's true, but they told Bob Lazar that the ETs, I don't like to say aliens, but ETs, um, or these beings, whatever they are. I think they're basically more evolved humans, essentially. Um, uh, they not more evolved, but like they went down the path towards eusociality, towards being eusocial. Um, the government told Bob Lazar that they call us containers. It's like, why? What do we contain? Genetic information. And how is that genetic information even useful unless you're not that far from us, really? I mean, you could look totally different from us. With CRISPR, in like 2 generations, you can just be like totally different. It doesn't take a million years of evolution to go from a human to a gray if you're using CRISPR. It takes like less than a couple hundred years. That's crazy, but that's true. I mean, you just a few generations. Uh, a dozen generations. It could be that quick. And maybe even less. I mean, it depends on how much gene altering you're doing. You could do a lot of gene altering with CRISPR. So, and it would not take much to give somebody slightly larger head. They already did it to these girls. I mean, I'm not saying their head is bigger than normal. These little girls who Chinese scientist altered, but he made them smarter, or at least they are likely to be. And he knew what he's doing, and that was 1 generation. It didn't take any kind of selection process, sexual selection, natural selection, environmental selection, which is natural. So natural selection breaks down into environmental and sexual, basically. And should be, or you could say social and environmental, which would be like social is usually sexual selection. If it's a sexually reproducing species. But it seems inevitable that humans go down that path. I don't think that we'll go as far as they did as the ETs did, but I need a better word. Like, I think that, like, what do we call these things? I don't like the word aliens. I don't like the word I like the word ETs if they're from a previous aeon, but if they're not, and they're just from a previous civilization, then I guess we should call them something else. Like, I don't know. If we're Homo sapien, they would be like, Homo sapiens means. It is amazing that we are just like mammals. I know that we're unique, but we're not that unique necessarily. If I mean, we are and we aren't. If considering that these beings are around. Um, Humanity still has a very important function, though, that's different from those other beings. Okay, let's see here. Homo sapiens means wise man or knowledgeable man. And human can refer to any members of the homogeneous. I think that these things would be like, let's see, homo eusocial. Eusocial. Are humans eusocial? Humans who are more loosely eusocial dominate land vertebrates. What is eusocial behavior? Yep. Entails a nest sharing, division of labor, including a caste system. I didn't even read this, by the way. I just know. I mean, it's obvious, but with a sterile worker caste caring for offspring of the reproductive caste. This is it. That is the dividing line. Yeah, we're really getting there. Hymenoptera is a large order of insects. Many of the species are parasitic. Interesting. I think these beings are probably too. I mean, if we are containers, like, guys. So where I'm from, in Tucson, Arizona, there is a type of wasp. And that type of wasp is called the tarantula hawk. This is it. Has what arguably the most painful sting in the world. Tarantula hawk. This wasp right here. Look at this thing. It is huge, okay? They're really that big. I grew up seeing these things all the time. Look at that stinger. Okay? What they do is they go and they find a tarantula and they sting it and they paralyze it. And then they drag that tarantula down into a hole in the ground. They live underground and they lay their eggs with the tarantula. And then the babies hatch out and eat the tarantula. So they are a parasitic wasp species when it comes to reproduction. And yeah, using their sting to paralyze their prey before dragging it to a brood nest. As living food, a single egg is laid on the prey, hatching to a larva which eats the still living prey. It's literally like they're using tarantulas as containers. In a way. The parasitoid wasps, with all but the wood wasps being the wasp. As parasitoids, they lay their eggs on or in the bodies of arthropods. Yep. This is a tarantula hawk is a parasitoid wasp, I'm pretty sure. I mean, they would have to be. Spider wasp. A velvet ant. I was stung by one of these once. It's basically, actually, it's like a wingless wasp. It hurts a lot. A lot. One was in my bed as a kid. It's part of growing up in Arizona. It's what they look like. It's actually a wasp. It looks like an ant, but because it doesn't have wings, but it's a wasp. Yeah. It's a species of wasp. Yeah, they're one of the largest parasitoid wasps. Bingo. I aced field studies in school. Could have taught that class. It was the only class I probably ever aced in high school. It was about wildlife of Arizona, and I obviously like knew everything. It was the only class that I was like that. By the way, was not a good student at all. But that's because literally I would ditch class and even as a little kid and just go for a walk in the desert and see what kind of animals I could find, which is why I aced field studies. But this is one of those animals that I would find all the time, and they use tarantulas as reproduction containers. I'm not saying that, you know, alien larvae are eating us like in, the movie Alien. But what are those things called? The xenomorphs. But that I do think that they probably need us because otherwise why are we here? I don't think this idea that they're just like waiting for us to join like the Galactic Federation. I just don't believe that at all. I think that's nonsense. I hope that's correct. I don't think it's correct at all. That sounds like wishful thinking. I just really don't believe it. But if they're hiding underground and using us, and they probably are, otherwise, why are they hiding themselves and also, like, not, killing us and taking over the surface? Because they are probably using us for something. I don't know what exactly, but given that I would expect them to have destroyed their ability to reproduce via gene manipulation, I would assume that has something to do with it. It's got to be a very heavy discussion, and it's also not an active chat, but that's fine. I'll relabel this genetics and aliens. China would have done this. They would have definitely been the first to do this. The East does not have the same, put the same value on the sanctity of the individual the way that the West does. The West does not value the sanctity of the group. The East does not value the sanctity of the individual. They're both important. But they're both necessary. I mean, they're both two sides of a coin. But there is a difference in how that expresses itself. And those that don't value the sanctity of the individual so much don't have as many quarrels about the ethics of altering the genes of babies without, their permission. I'm not saying you need to get baby's permission for everything. It's a baby, but there's all kinds of things that parents do. Parents pierce their kids' ears when they're little, and they choose whether or not to circumcise them, and they choose what medical procedures they get and what vaccines they get and all kinds of stuff. You make choices for children, but the thing is about gene editing is that it doesn't just impact the one generation. That gene, those babies that they edited, that the implications and effects of that are now perpetual, assuming that those kids can have kids when they grow up. Like the effects are perpetual. That doesn't mean that just because they can have children mean that they will be able to, uh, 2, 3 generations down the line. That's not necessarily true. There's a lot of differences here. Humans do not seem to be able, at least that I'm aware of, and I haven't like known the details of people trying, but uh, so far as I know, there are no ape uh, human hybrids. I know there was like one chimpanzee that people thought could have been a while back, but because he walked upright, but it seemed like after looking at the genetics, that he was just a chimp that was walking upright. And but so far as I know, and there's uh, there are some species of snakes where or some types of snakes. I don't even want to say species they're fairly different, but they can breed. And like one of them is my favorite snake. It's right here. I keep them, and it's called an Amazon tree boa. And this is my favorite snake to keep. I have a pair that I'm hoping breeds this upcoming year. This year, she's laid a bunch of infertile ovum, unfortunately. But I need to leave the male in there longer. But I have one like this. It's called a calico tiger Amazon tree boa. And you can mix this with this, which is an emerald tree boa. Okay, they're in the same genus, which is called Corallus, just tree boas. And they can make babies, and those babies look like this. This is a hybrid. So far as we know, these babies are infertile, and most of them don't live very long. You also have mules. I don't know how you pronounce or how you spell mule, even. A mule. Yep. Is the offspring of a male donkey and a female horse. I wonder why it's a male donkey and a female horse, or whether or not it could be a female donkey and a male horse. Horses and donkeys are different species with different numbers of chromosomes. Of the 2 first-generation hybrids between these 2 species, a mule is easier to obtain than a hinny. I'm guessing a hinny is the offspring of a male horse and a female donkey. It is a reciprocal to the common mule, which is a product of a male donkey and a female horse. Okay. Interesting. It is distinctive from the mule, both in physiology and temperament, as a consequence of genomic imprinting. Okay. Fertility, sterility, and rarity. Hinnies are difficult to obtain because of the differences in number of chromosomes of the horse and the donkey. Donkey has 62 and a horse has 64. The uneven number of chromosomes results in an incomplete reproductive system. The equine hybrid is easier to obtain when the lower chromosome count, the donkey, is in the male. Therefore, breeding for hinnies is more hit and miss than breeding for mules. A male hinny or mule can and will mate, but the emission is not fertile. They have no sperm in the emission. Others have sperm that is not motile. Male hinnies and mules are usually castrated to help control their behavior. Okay. Female mules have been known on rare occasions to produce offspring when mated to a horse or donkey, although this is extremely uncommon. See, this is what I'm saying. You get to a point where like it happens, but it's super rare, or the offspring isn't very healthy, or it's like it's not just always yes or no. And we will be doing this through artificial gene manipulation, I think. And these geneticists, and I was speaking to one on Clubhouse a while back, and he was mocking me. And I don't care. People mock me. It's fine. I get it. I would mock me, probably, which isn't good, but I would have at a certain point in my life where I thought, I was Mr. Science. But he was basically saying that just if you use, he was like Russian. I don't want to like, I'm pretty good at impressions sometimes, but where's the line? People freak out. I don't want to seem like I'm mocking Russian people, but he just had, it's funny. I actually, not to really mock him, but I thought at first for the entire conversation that he was a woman because of his voice. So I'm not going to imitate him because it wasn't just Russian. It was like very, very feminine. I was like looking for a girl in the like little where it shows all the heads in or profiles in the room in Clubhouse, and I thought he was this girl that was there, but it was a guy. And he's a Russian geneticist. And he was basically saying that so long as you use CRISPR's, the technique that is more precise for CRISPR, then you could get a more precise edit. It's like, well, no shit. But what if what if that's not the problem? What if it's not about the precision of the edit? What if it's about the fact that you're editing a self-referencing information chain out of context, inputs? What about that? What if it doesn't matter how like precise you are? You could be absolutely precise, and you still destroyed information coherence. So it's the hubris. It's literally like Jurassic Park. It's like, you only asked if you could and never asked if you should. And we are seeing that. We will see that increasingly with scientific advances over the next, I don't even know, 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, we have autonomous hunter drones coming and genetic destruction, all kinds of things on the horizon. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through it, but it is going to suck at certain points on the way. Just being honest. Since 1527, 60 cases of foals born to female mules around the world have been documented. That's it. In China, in 1981, a mule mare proved fertile with a donkey sire. This is like the future of humanity, because like this is the implications of CRISPR and gene editing. It's not going to be enough. Like, you're going to have to know whether or not your partner is a GMO. Like, there's going to be organic people over here, and it's going to be an increasingly smaller group, because the more that there's interbreeding, the more that CRISPR edited people pass along those artificially altered genes. And that's just, you're going to have to know all the way back to 2020 to 2019, which was when the first CRISPR edit took place. It turns out that the babies involved, Lulu and Nana, have not been gifted with neatly edited genes after all. Not only are they not necessarily immune to HIV, they have been accidentally endowed with versions of CCR5 that are entirely made up. They likely do not exist in any other human genome on the planet. This turned into quite a stream. And I'm exhausted. I didn't sleep very well last night, so if I look exhausted, I am. But this is the beginning of Pandora's. I mean, it's not just the beginning of Pandora's box. We opened it a while back, but this is the beginning of another chapter in Pandora's box that is almost the scariest one. It's almost scarier than nukes. Um, it I mean, we haven't had a nuke go off, so I can't say it's. I don't know how scary that would be. Very scary, but it's this. The problem with this is that this is going to get worse over the generations, not better. They 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 have taken these baby girls, they have edited them, and impacted every single successive generation that comes after them. And it's possible the genes. Be quiet. Be quiet. Lay down. Lay down. I don't know why you're barking. It's possible that the genes over the generations uh, actually, basically heal themselves, and that the DNA heals itself, is able to self-reference and turn certain bits of information in that or certain bits of the DNA that were non-information because of a lack of coherence back into information. But it's also possible that it just gets worse and worse with every successive generation. And I used to be pro CRISPR. Like, I was the most pro CRISPR person there was. I was waiting for CRISPR since I was in my early teens. I was just like, I'm pretty sure, at least, I can't remember when I first heard about it, but it was many, many years ago. I know that in 2014, which was in 2013, I was researching where CRISPR was at, and in 2012, I was researching where CRISPR was at. And probably earlier than that. And I was like waiting. I was like, they're gonna cure everything, and they will. They will cure everything with this. They will also create uh, totally novel problems that are uh, have never been encountered. Why is CRISPR bad? CRISPR gene editing can cause unwanted changes in human embryos. Study finds instead of addressing genetic mutations, the CRISPR machinery prompted cells to lose entire chromosomes. Guys, I'm telling you. I was talking to my family today about this, someone in my family, and I was like, I'm not positive that I'm accurate on this, but I'm like 70% confident. I don't know where that number comes from, but it's what I'm feeling. Um, and I have my batting average at this point over the past like 2 years has been astounding. People ask, what is the purpose of what is the application of a theory of everything? To allow you to understand, full stop. Not everything, but a lot more than you do if you don't understand the universal pattern of information processing that is the pattern of mind. Um, Gosh, I was the most pro CRISPR person. I was like, they're gonna cure. I was just waiting. All those diseases that are really, really hard. I've always been into viruses, and all those diseases that have always been really hard to treat or cure. Maya, come here. Lay down. Lay down. Relax. I don't know why you're freaking out, but you need to relax. My dog is freaking out. I have a Belgian Malinois, and she's losing it right now for some reason. I can't hear anything, but she's acting like she's hearing something. But I was like waiting for them to cure HIV and herpes. Not because I need that to be cured. I don't have either of those. But these are two diseases that are very difficult historically for our medical, professionals to deal with. And that's due to just the way in which they act and the way that they just their being, just the way that they are makes them difficult. And there's a few different reasons. But so those are the two that I was waiting to see. That and the cold, the common cold. It's like they're going to cure HIV, the common cold, and herpes. And if they do that, if they cure those three, they've got everything. Like they would be able to cure everything. I think almost everything. There might be like issues with some cancers and stuff, but that you couldn't deal with CRISPR. But I don't know. We'll see. But it will create new problems, which is that problem is the destruction of information. You cannot introduce out of context information into a system that is dependent upon self-referencing, okay, or internal coherence, and it doesn't add information. It detracts information, because information is only information if it can be interpreted. It has to be in context. Context is key, as I've said before. It is what causes information. And it is what causes anything to be information. Anything to be informing. It has to have context. If you introduce something out of context, you destroy information. You don't add it. And apparently here, a powerful gene editing tool called CRISPR-Cas9, which this was written in October 31st, 2020, New York Times, nubbed the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for 2 female scientists, can cause serious side effects in human embryos, prompting them to discharge large chunks of their genetic material. It's literally exactly what I expected. Which makes sense, guys, because this thing is double helix. It is the double helix. It's exactly the double helix. You can make 2 squares in this structure. One here. And see how it doesn't go all the way to the edge? Let's see if I got this right. Yep. What is the count? 19. The helical diameter of DNA is 19. This is 2 overlapping 19 by 19 squares. The helical diameter of this structure is 19. 19 what? I don't know. Whatever you want to call this. information, bits of information. It's 19 bits. So if we look at DNA, you look at the this is saying 23, 20, and 18. So that would be 23, 43, 53 plus 8 is 61. Right? I thought it was 19. Yeah, helical diameter 19, 19, B form and Z form. Interesting. But why is it getting me different information in different places? I mean, I have the data. At least I did. It would be right. Where is it? Right here. B form, A form, Z form, 19. So okay, so this B form is 19. Interesting. Helical diameter. I haven't looked at this in a while. It's been like a year. Well, or close to it. Yeah, helical diameter, 19, 19, 19. This is like... I don't know why Wikipedia is differing from this. I might not understand. There's definitely some things that I am not. I'm not an expert on this. You can't be an expert on everything and also be like aware of enough to work in this space. You need to be competent in a lot, and or at least have a base, so that a base to build on. So like I know enough about DNA that I could go and research more as needed. Same thing with, chemistry and physics and everything. But I'm not, you know, a mathematician specifically or a physicist specifically. You just can't be. I mean, maybe on paper, yeah, you can have a degree, but like it's not. You need you need to be able to see the big picture. Uh, Interesting. Okay. I don't know what A stands for. Like 19A or 23A. I need to look again. I forgot. It's definitely it is um it is what they're counting. Obviously. Triple-stranded DNA. Now I'm just getting interested in things that I should wait until after I get off the stream to look at. Why is this different than what I was looking at before? Don't know. Okay, A, what is this? What is A again? An angstrom, that's what it is. I forgot. An angstrom is a metric unit of length. Okay, so it's basically they're all like 19 on average. It's an angstrom. It's not objective. It's a subjective measurement. But it's still, this is still, by the way, I stand by this. What I had called out earlier. It definitely matters. I mean, it matters also to the cohesiveness of the work, because this is made of squares that is the quantum of consciousness model, and each one of those has an internal sum of 19, and right here, I mean, it's that actually is the actual model. Internal sum 19, but I'm just messing with the values in this. But you can see these two overlapping squares, and you can see the symmetry lines and the chirality that exists, whereas you can't cut it perfectly in half, and that's due to spin. But it's symmetrical from the center out, chiral from the top down, or from the side through, because it's spinning this way. But there is a symmetry that's formed between this structure that's 19 as the sum, and then 19 as the count. It gets switched as it alternates, as the structure alternates up. It's like it's fractal, but it's not just fractal. It's like inverted. It's like an inverted fractal, and it turns inside out basically as each time that you look at it from each different perspective. So the count becomes the sum then becomes the count, and it switches values, the structure as it builds. So it's fascinating. It's mathematically the most interesting. I think it is the most interesting structure in mathematics. This is going to be, regardless of whether or not it's me or somebody else that rediscovers it long after it's been ignored by, from me, who knows? It doesn't matter to me. I mean, it does, but God's will be done, and like there's a reason for me doing this, and only God knows that reason. But Eric Weinstein said something similar once. He was like, geometric unity will do what it will do. It's like, yes, it is not in vain. That doesn't mean it will do what you want it to do, and same thing with sentient singularity theory. But it will, do something. It will inspire someone if it doesn't end up being recognized onto itself. But this structure, one day, I'm calling it, I'm 100% positive, this verse structure is going to be pivotal in everything, in every field. Literally every field. And I mean literally every field. People get mad when I say that on Instagram, and they're like, what's the application of your work? I'm like, everything. Like, you gotta ask a specific question if you want a specific answer. You can't just be like, what's the application of the theory of everything? It's like, if you ask, what's the application of the of CRISPR? Okay, that's something specific, and it's not that specific though. It's anything medically related almost. But what is, you can ask, what is the specific application of I don't know, the study of immunology? Okay, like that is something that's specific, and there's an answer that's specific. But if you're like, what is the application of I don't know, medicine? It's like, okay, treat the human body. It's like, okay, what is the application of physiology? Take it a step up, like just knowing the human body, physiology. What's the application? Knowing yourself and all that, your parts, and how, so that you can go and apply that understanding to almost anything that you do. What is the application of biology? Take it a step up from there. It's like a lot. What is the, if you're going to ask what's the application of the theory of everything, you're not even just asking what is the application of science. You're saying, what is the application of science, art, morality? Like, what is the application of that? That is, the answer to that question is everything. So it is, you can't ask what's the application of a theory of everything. Everything. Obviously. The more you think about it, the more obvious it gets. There is a guy on YouTube, I forgot who it was, Luis Razzo, points him out. Actually, we're going to look. And he's a physicist, and he was like, he basically claims to have solved the theory of everything in front of a bunch of other physicists, and then is like, so what now? Nothing. Doesn't really mean anything. Doesn't help us at all. Bull. Bull. That means you didn't do it. Luis Razo. Let's see. I interviewed Luis Razo a while back on here, um, and I like Luis. I would consider him a friend of mine. We're not very close friends, but we speak every now and then. And uh, let's see here. We have a lot of overlaps in our ideas. A brief and intuitive theory of everything is the name, what he calls this theory. And it's a book. Let's see here. How to evaluate theories of everything. This is something actually really, really like. He basically says if it doesn't have human implications that are, if a theory doesn't make the claim that it can help humanity, then you should ignore it. And I agree with him on that. Theory will also hurt humanity, just like, understanding nuclear fusion could one day help humanity, and as of yet not really but it has hurt humanity. We made a hydrogen bomb. We have not made fusion reactors. Okay, right here. But I agree with his claim that if it doesn't claim to help humanity, you should ignore it.
Here's a symbolic example of how one prominent string theorist, Every0ne, sees the potential value of string theory.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and to be telling you this evening about what I think are exciting developments in theoretical physics.
By the way, he thinks this is exciting, and we are also subsidizing this with taxpayer dollars, and we'll see how exciting and useful this is in a minute, per his own explanation. Like, what is going on?
Then you may ask, what is it good for?
As you can see, Every0ne is good-humored about the apparent lack of utility in string theory, but other physicists are...
He thinks it's literally essentially useless and also exciting at the same time. That is not something that we should be focusing on as a society at all. Not saying string theory doesn't have interesting aspects to it that are gonna cross into, physics as we move forward. It definitely does. These abstract structures that they're that they're mapping in string theory or deducing in string theory are real, but it's like, if you can't point to where it is in reality, then you are not the expert on this. You just you deduced it from the universe, but you didn't contextualize it. So it's literally useless. It's less than useless. It's counterproductive in relativity, because anything that is useless and pursued in relativity is a waste, because we have time as a constraint and energy as a constraint. And basically what's happening is that string theory is basically like CRISPR edit to science. It's a bunch of information out of context that's been added. When they say things like, we could be a soap bubble vibrating in 11-dimensional hyperspace or something like that, that means nothing to them as well. It doesn't just mean nothing to you. It means nothing to them. Even if they could say, oh, I can explain it to you. No, they can't. If they could actually explain it to you, we would all know what it means to be a soap bubble in a bubble bath in 11-dimensional hyperspace. Like, we would know. We don't, because that means nothing. And the fact that we are giving it credence or clout or you know, attention means that out of context information is being entered into our sense-making structure, and we are literally being made insane because of it. We're like, oh, string theory. I used to say this. String theory is, it's like a theory. It's going to be the theory of everything. I used to say that all the time as if I knew. I did not know. And if you're introducing information that is purely abstract mathematics that you cannot link to physics, like you can touch, Bott periodicity over there. This is this period of Bott periodicity, and this is this period of Bott periodicity. And this is the Calabi-Yau manifold. And you could point to it. Then it is not physics, and it is not useful. It is counterproductive. It's destruction of information, because now we think we know and we don't, which means you have destroyed information. If you think that string theory is the future, is the theory of everything, and that it's, I don't know, that it's going to describe reality for us and contextualize it in a useful and understandable way so that everyone can understand string theory. I'm not saying everybody needs to know the mathematical language, but if you can't do that, it's not the theory of everything. Theory of everything is something that can be experienced and understood firsthand, because it's a theory of mind. It's a theory of consciousness. It has to be understood firsthand. It can be tested, in objective ways, and it can be then used for engineering purposes and all kinds of things. But it's something that is deduced from examining your own mind and how it processes information. But it means that I could probably tell you, I would put money down. I'll put $100 that, not even $100, I would bet $1,000 easily that I know what Bott periodicity is, essentially. I would bet $100 that I know what the Calabi-Yau manifold really is and could describe what's happening with it, even though I don't know the mathematical language. That is so, it's not just important, it's essential to any pursuit in science, whatever that means. It has to be useful. If it can't be, don't even focus on it. Luis Razzo, definitely right on that. He really nailed it. It's such an important and defining attribute that allows you to just take the few theories that actually could, or claim to be able to probably be useful. Geometric unity, constructor theory, sentient singularity theory. I don't know what else. Beyond just the personal. I mean, yes, every single theory claims to be personally useful, except maybe string theory, which claims to be like not useful at all, according to that guy. But I'm not an expert on string theory, so I'm not going to say he's wrong on that. But I mean, there's parts of string theory that are absolutely correct. just like all these other theories. But the culture of it is literally it's counterproductive. It's literally like CRISPR. You're trying to change information or to input information, and it's out of context, and you don't know what those 11 dimensions are. You don't even know to define those dimensions as. People, physicists I remember were saying like they're really, really, really small parts of space. No, they're not. Like, definitely not. That doesn't mean that there isn't a structural aspect to this that would be viewable in I don't know, you could say a small level, but it's not small. Like, that's the problem. It's like, don't even say that word small. If you say small, you're stuck in relativity. It's not the theory of everything. It's not objectivity. Gosh, guys, the fact that a lot of wasps, I didn't even think about the fact that a lot of wasps are parasitoid. They literally have containers. I know I'm going back, like, that's like 45 minutes ago, but I'm looking at the tab because I'm closing tabs, and that there's only one pattern, and it might be that the inevitable result of technological development is for a eusocial society to be developed, where most likely you inevitably end up underground, which is almost everything. I mean, look at all hornets, wasps, bees. Yes, they can also put like a hive somewhere, but for the most part, yellow jackets live underground, tarantula hawks underground, ants underground, bees, cracks in the ground for the most part. I mean, cracks in rocks and things. That's where I've always found bees. Beehives, like actual intact beehives. They go, in the walls of a building, inside of a tree hollow, inside of, a crack in a rock face. Like this is the easy way. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Where you take advantage of natural structures like the ground, and all the protection that it offers. We are just stuck between that. You have Elon Musk right now trying to build tunnels underneath LA, and he's talking about how it's, earthquake resistant and much more efficient, and also, you could go almost countless levels down, whereas there is a limit to how high you can build depending on the materials that you're using, and you'd have to use like carbon nanotube type structures to build really, really, really high, much higher than we currently do. I mean, we're basically reaching limits, I think, of glass and of what glass and steel and concrete can do. With the thing, buildings like the Burj Khalifa. I mean, that thing is basically just a freaking antenna at the top. It's not even like it's squared off all the way. It's very inefficient. You have to get smaller as you go up, and it's much more efficient to just drill down. We don't want to lose the sun, but you don't get the sun when you're working in an office building in a skyscraper unless you're lucky and you're next to the window. That's not most people in a skyscraper or any building for that matter. So it's literally just a mental, like, holdover. It's not really that we expect it in our cubicles. But you could go underground so easily. I think it is the future, and that probably means it's also the present of any beings that are more technologically advanced than us. It also makes sense that they would be parasitoid to some degree, and that would be related to reproduction, and that it would also be that they would be eusocial. Sounds like a lot of the rumors that the UFO community discusses. Not saying they're correct. I'm just saying I've heard them say it. And like, Kurchai Mungle said that the UFO community will not get any credit, he doesn't think, for basically like being the guys that knew what was going on. And that it will most likely be the skeptic types like the Neil deGrasse Tysons who are just like, we actually got it right all along because our thought process was actually correct. I agree with him completely. I think he's totally right. Kurt is totally right. But if they like imagine, it seems like the UFO community knew a lot. Sifting through the bull in that is also difficult though. Like, I don't believe in the Galactic Federation is just waiting for us to ascend and then they can just swoop in and join us and teach us the ways of peace. No. This is probably a eusocial colony that is basically humans who destroyed their genes and now have to rely on societal centralized reproduction processes and may also be parasitoid with us. Like that, and they probably live underground and they're not from another planet. Like that's probably the truth of it. And the thing is Luis Elizondo was discussing in an interview with GQ, actually GQ like UK or something like that, recently, and he was saying, we shouldn't be so quick to assume that these are just from another planet. Maybe they're from here. I think he knows that they're from here. He's just not saying it. And I mean, if they have recovered biological material, then they have tested the genes, guys. They know, and I assume that if they did, they probably saw some very interesting and familiar things. But I mean, if they're from a previous civilization, especially, but I mean, the DNA is DNA. It is an objective structure. It will always evolve. There's no, there is no instance in which helical self-referencing chemical blockchains are not the basis of biological life, essentially. And but he said that we should entertain the idea that these beings might just be another part of nature that we just didn't really have access to view yet. Probably, which means they probably follow the same patterns of nature, like, that of Hymenoptera, bees and ants and wasps. Fakery, do you personally interact with the beauty? How can we more precisely appreciate beauty? Yes, I do personally interact with beauty. How can we more precisely appreciate beauty? Know what it is. Beauty is something that is ever present and eternal. It is not. We've confused sexiness with beauty in our society. And I'm not just saying physically, I mean like in everything. Sexiness is something that is contextual. It's not eternal. Like sexy is it's specific and it's fleeting. It's a fad. Okay, sexiness is a fad. I mean, it's a fad that happens generation after generation, but it is a fad. You wouldn't call, I mean, no offense to any seniors out there, but elderly people are not considered especially sexy. Neither are children. And if you think that either of those two are, you are outside the norm. The norm is prime reproductive age, That's sexy. Sexy men, sexy women. It's not there in the beginning, it's not there in the end, but beauty is ever present. You can have beautiful babies and beautiful elderly people. You wouldn't say sexy, but you would say beautiful. So you have to know what beauty is. Beauty is eternal. It is ever present. It's not fleeting. It's not a fad. And it's also found everywhere, almost essentially. I think it's found everywhere, but some places are easier to identify it than others. But know what you're looking for. Know there are certain constraints that you can test to see if something is truly beautiful. Is it a fad? Is it fleeting? Is it something that wasn't always there? Is it something that can be found in all times in the timeline of whatever you are examining? If it is, then it could be beautiful. If it isn't, it's not beautiful. That doesn't mean it's ugly. It just means it's not beauty, which is... Beauty is like truth. It's funny because when you look at the standard model of physics, you have up quarks, down quarks, charm quarks, and strange quarks. So up and charm are masculine, down and strange are feminine. And then you have, at the bottom, you have, people call it top quark or bottom quark, but it's also called the truth quark and the beauty quark. Truth is masculine, the beauty is feminine. Truth and beauty are two sides of one eternal coin. And the truth is always beautiful. The objective truth, the total truth, that's what's beautiful. And you can tell when it's total because it's eternal. It isn't fleeting. It isn't a fad. And that's what I would say is like most important to look for. That's how you know, even if somebody's dressed beautifully versus dressed sexy. You could say almost that like strange is almost the same as sexy, because if you look at the masculine charm, the charm quark, charming quark, is basically, you say, oh, he's charming. It's like that's basically meaning like attractive, but not just attractive. It's like sexy attractive almost. So the opposite of that is like they call it strange in the standard model, but it is also, you could call it the sexy quark, I think. But it's contextual almost. It's not eternal. It's not ever present. It has its purpose, and its purpose is to not always be present. Very nice work in general, just dropping in to give some love. Thank you, Mathematical Metaphysics. Keep it up. Spectrum of wasps and bees species is amazing. Yes, it is. I think it's the same with humans, but stranger, and more unknown, obscure. Just consider Sasquatch, Bigfoot versus gray aliens. Humans are probably right in the middle. Yeah, essentially. You have like an almost solitary, very hairy, not technologically advanced being, is Sasquatch. I'm not saying I believe in Sasquatch. I have no idea. I am what would it be called? Agnostic about Sasquatch. You can be agnostic about Sasquatch. You can't be agnostic about God, but you can be agnostic about Sasquatch. And that's because God is sentient existence, and we all interact with existence, and we don't all interact with Sasquatch. So you have to, in order to be agnostic about something, it has to be something that you don't interact with every day, and you interact with existence every day. Do you lean, when you really truly think about it, do you lean towards the idea that it is a consciousness, a single consciousness? or that existence itself is conscious, the universe is conscious. If you believe that, or you lean that way, you're a theist. If you lean towards it's just inanimate dust that is not conscious, and that the universe is not a consciousness, it's not a sentience, then you are an anti-theist. You're not an atheist. You're an anti-theist. There is no difference between. There is no atheism. This is another thing. It's like a bad word. I'm going to do a whole stream on bad words. Bad words are the introduction of information that is out of context because they are describing things that do not exist, like atheist. There's no instance in which atheist is a term that it conveys any meaning whatsoever, because it is impossible to be an atheist. You can be an anti-theist or a theist. You can be agnostic, not about God, but about Sasquatch. So there is literally no instance in which atheist is a practical term, and it needs to be thrown away. But anti-theist is the word. There's nothing. It's like saying, do you tend to lean towards the fact that life exists? Like, are you a lifeist or are you an anti-lifeist? Almost. It's like you interact with life every day because you are life every day, and so you either believe that this is nothing, and there are people that believe this, that there are like people getting their PhDs in philosophy of consciousness who are writing their thesis that consciousness doesn't exist. Good luck wrapping your head around that. But I know I've met multiple ones that are doing that. And that makes no sense. Anything that you interact with every day, you are forced to have an opinion on that perspective, any perspective that you interact with every day. And you interact with the perspective of existence and life every day. You have to pick, when push comes to shove, do you think you're inside of a sentient being, or do you think that you're inside of a dust ball? Even if you don't think about it, I don't think about it every second. I killed a fly earlier today, and I've started to feel bad when I kill like bugs, but it was bothering me. And there's always that satisfaction, you killed it, but then it's like, that's a sentient being, and it just annoyed you, and you just murdered it because it was annoying, and felt bad. But even the molecules that are in this desk are also sentient. The desk is not sentient, but the molecules that make it up are sentient. Not sentient, this pen. Molecules that make it up are sentient. So are the atoms in those molecules, and also probably the hadrons. They are alive, but they are either the hands of the universe, or they are the hands of the universe and also sentient themselves. Sovereign sentiences. This is a clump of entangled titanium atoms. That's what this is made of. That's the species that this is. This is just a cluster of titanium they are alive. Like, those atoms are literally, they are living beings. They're not alive. Sexiness is the new popular thing. Yes, it is. It's a new popular thing. And it's also it's like nostalgia. It's like nostalgic even. It's something that fades and also manifests. Beauty is something that exists. It persists, but not sexiness. So if you want to figure out, like, are you dressed beautifully or are you dressed sexy? And they are not the same. Like, would what you're wearing look good on a 2-year-old, and would it look good on an 80-year-old and a 20-year-old? If it looks good on all those people and it looks appropriate, it's beautiful. If it doesn't, it's not as beautiful. It literally is not as beautiful. It's maybe sexy on a 20-year-old and look weird on an 80-year-old and not appropriate on a child, but that's an outfit that is not as beautiful. So you can use this idea to help judge even fashion. The pattern repeats through all species. Yes. No Vulcans or Klingons. I mean, I do think that they're essentially like other humanoids from preceding aeons. That they could. That's what these beings, these greys, that's what I'll call them, are either basically ancient humans that from a previous civilization, or they are humanoids from a preceding aeon. And if that's both of these possibilities allow for multiple species of beings. You could have, I don't know, like reptilians or whatever. Like you could have maybe the humanoids in the preceding aeon to this one were didn't come from mammals, they came from reptiles. I don't know. Like, I'm not saying it's likely, I'm just saying it's possible. And they would just be humanoid reptiles, essentially, that would be reptilians. And then, but they would walk on their 2 legs and have 2 hands and arms that would allow them to create technological, mechanisms and progress. And they would basically have the same basic body structure as us. Humanoid. They're basically filling the same role. And then I think what happens is that when the preceding aeon basically goes coherent, so becomes a unified structure, there are beings that don't want to join for whatever reason, fear probably, and want to hold on to what they have. That's what it is, probably. They just don't want to give up what they are, regardless of what the state is of that being. They could be in a dystopian Children of Men type situation, but the unknown is frightening, and so it's like you don't want to give up your job, even if it's possible you could get a better job. You don't know that you're going to get a better job, so you stick with the same job. That is like the same mentality that would drive not joining the unified assembly of the preceding aeon, and then basically you would just jump to the succeeding aeon, I think, and at a certain point, and then to escape the preceding aeon. So basically, you've chosen to be bacteria instead of a blood cell. There are weasels, skunks, raccoons, foxes, coyotes, wolves, bears. List goes on forever. Yep. Oh yeah. There is the same pattern in all of those too, as in humans. You have 2 phenotypes, 2 phenotypical degrees of freedom, and an intrinsic that are reflecting across an intrinsic constraint. So you have wolves, highly social, large pack animals. You have foxes, small, living in pairs or solitary lives. They're reflecting across an intrinsic constraint, which is basically like the change space between the two, which is coyotes, jackals, things like that. So you have the same exact pattern in every. You have that in humans. You have what you would call the sub-Saharan African phenotype and the like East Asian phenotype. And one has curly hair, one has straight hair, one has pale skin, one has dark skin, one is large bodied, one is small bodied, one is highly social in the societal groups that it forms. So like East Asian exist very densely populated societies, very, very highly evolved social and or cultural trends like bowing and honor to parents and just things that help maneuver and make allow you to sensibly maneuver within a densely populated group. And then you have the sub-Saharan African phenotype, which does not have the same just communal emphasis on its culture. It's very individualistic. It's very expressive. It's very, artistic. It's not as like engineering type, but it's like much more artistic and expressive and emotional. Less logical, I guess. I don't know if that's even the right word for it, but it's like, you get what I mean. It's less it's just more emotional and less I don't want to say less logical, because there isn't really less logical. There's just more emotional and less emotional, and emotion at some point can trump logic. But everybody has logic. It's just whether or not you have enough emotion to trump your logic. There is no lacking of logic. Logic is built into the structure of reality. That's why anything exists. So this idea that it's like, oh, they're less logical and they're more emotional. It's like, no. It's just less emotional, more emotional. Everybody's logical. It's just, do your emotions trump your ability to back up from the situation and like look at it objectively. That's all it is. So, and that's situation dependent. There is no such thing as lacking logic. It doesn't exist. Everything has logic. Every bit of existence has logic. So it's safe to say that all links can be accounted for, maybe, or even civilizations. You think there are ancient Egyptian and Swiss people up there and out there somewhere? I think older than Egyptian and Swiss. I think that the Egyptians stole the pyramids. I don't think that they made them. And I don't think that they made the Sphinx. I think they carved the head to a pharaoh from a lion. Look at the... you ever seen the Sphinx from the sky? Look at this. First, this is a decent enough photo. Look at how small that head is compared to the body. That was a lion, guys. And they carved that head. The Egyptians did some impressive stuff. That's impressive. This is not the original head of the Sphinx. If it is, this is just horrible. Like, the proportions are so far off. Like, look at this. Look at how small that head is. It's like, it doesn't convey power at all. It conveys like it's like patronizing. This tiny little head. Look at it. This structure, way, way older than the ancient Egyptians. There is physical evidence of that. There's evidence of flooding, and there hasn't flooded in this area um, for like 12,000 years or something. But this, you're telling me that they were so, the Egyptians were just so, they, even the Egyptians, not even like the preceding civilization that made the pyramids and made the Sphinx originally, I think, you could call them Atlanteans maybe. Well, it doesn't matter. Um, the the Egyptians were still impressive. This is not impressive. I would have better proportions than this. I'm not saying that I would carve a better head than that originally was carved. I would not. But the head that I made on a clay, version of this would be more proportional to the body than this head. It's not proportional at all. They carved it down from probably a really eroded lion head that was unsalvageable, and also why not some pharaoh was probably like, I want my head on top of the Sphinx, and the lion just looked terrible at that point because it was probably already 7 or 8 thousand years old and basically all broken up. So they just carved it into a pharaoh. Like this, you wouldn't do that. Like, you would never carve this. Like, why would you carve a pharaoh head on top of of just like an animal, which is like assuming it's basically a lion, but it's like, why? There's no reason other than there was already a lion. And you carved the rest. It even looks like it. This looks much older than this. Like, why is it at the top here less eroded than over here? Doesn't make sense. It'd be more exposed to the wind, I would think. I mean, I don't know for sure about that, but it's clearly not proportional. It looks like they carved a man's head into a busted lion's head. It's not that there's ancient Egyptians. The Egyptians stole the pyramids, or they found them. They found the Sphinx and altered it. They took the pyramids and turned it into a tomb. If it was a tomb, it was not originally a tomb. It's not a tomb. It's the universe. Look. Has 8 sides from above, but it looks like 4. Look at this. It's the pyramid from above. By the way, I don't know if I said this, but the offspring between these two snakes is largely infertile. I think I did say it. Just making sure I gave context to that. By the way, ligers too. and Tygon's liger. A male lion and a female tiger. Fertility of hybrid big cat females is well documented across a number of different hybrids. Male ligers are consequently sterile, while female ligers are not. See? You can't be messing with genes and not mess with fertility. You're gonna screw it up. And you're gonna screw it up before you realized that you screwed it up. There's no going slowly, because as soon as you do one action, it is where you alter genes, it's now permanent across that generation and every single successive generation. But where is it? Come on. Come on. Okay, here we go. Guys, it's the universe. I'm 100% positive. Not partially. 100%. Not 70. I am 100% positive that the Great Pyramid is, at least in part, meant to represent our world. But that means the universe, not just like Earth. But we're going to one day realize that there's not as big a difference between those two things as we originally thought. It's not a tiny part of the universe, Earth. It's quite a big part of the universe. Just looks very small. But we're not looking at things objectively. Look at that. It's the universe. You could also look at it like that. And like that. Subjective and objective perspective. This is the subjective perspective. It's amazing. I'm 100% positive this is a thing. I'm not like guessing and just seeing patterns. Yes, I'm looking for patterns. That's how you do science, or that's how you do anything. That's how you understand your world. Look for patterns. It's amazing. this. Consequences of these errors can be quite serious in some cases. This is CRISPR destroying information again. Some cells were so flummoxed by alterations that they simply gave up on trying to fix them. The units jettisoning entire chromosomes, the units into which human DNA is packaged, were often used to hearing about papers where CRISPR is very successful. But with the amount of power we hold with this tool, Dr. Kaplan said, it is crucial to understand consequences we didn't intend. Yeah, no S. Trying not to curse. I grew up in a family, a big, huge family of basically Brooklyn Jews. So they come from a cursing family, and my wife does not. And honestly, it's better not to. It gives power to when you actually do it. But like some of my siblings, every other word. The problem is that a lot of those curse words have like universal meaning. Shit means everything. That's the shit. That's a piece of shit. My dog took a shit. It's like it has endless meaning. Same thing with other curse words as well that are usually 4-letter words. Modifications made to sperm and eggs and embryos can be passed to future generations, raising the stakes for any mistakes made along the way. Yep. Although scientists have been tinkering with some genomes for decades, CRISPR-Cas9 can accomplish a precise type of genetic surgery that other tools cannot. That doesn't matter. Scientists, not to the results of over time, over generations. Scientists can use CRISPR to home in on specific regions of a genome and snip it into two. Sensing trouble, the cell rushes to heal its genetic wound, sometimes using a similar looking stretch of nearby intact DNA as a template as it stitches the pieces back together. This gives researchers the opportunity to splice in tailor-made template of their own in hopes that the cell will incorporate the intended change. Yeah, it's so amazing how much geneticists are absolutely clueless. They are absolutely clueless. Genealogy, as we used to call it, is about the study of lineages. Okay, it is about lineage structures that are impacted by the environment, which is really objectively a bunch of other sentient beings, but there's perspectives of, like, you don't look at the ground and think sentient being. You don't interact with it as a sentient being. It's not a sentient being, even if the molecules and atoms are. And universe. But you also do interact with sentient beings all around you, everything from other animals. Plants, you kind of treat like sentient beings, kind of not. But other humans you treat as sentient beings, dynamic structures. But then you also have this environment that you don't treat like that is just the constraint, the weather, the terrain, the temperature, I don't know, like everything around you that you don't think of as sentient. These things are information inputs from the outside in, essentially, that then leave an imprint on a self-referencing chemical blockchain, essentially, that is a bunch of proteins and molecules and atoms, and I mean, it's proteins are not really. I don't think a protein. A protein is like would be, as we talked about last week, how I think planaria are basically like corporations. They're like mobile but dead. They're soulless. It's just It's just a clump of cells basically that are behaving cooperatively, but they're not a single unified organism. Proteins are probably like that too, but on the smaller scale. And viruses are probably like that on an even smaller scale. And I think viruses would be smaller than proteins. And then on the level of society, you have corporations as basically that structure. Or hives, like a beehive. Some viruses have more than one layer of protein surrounding the nucleic acid. What? Okay. Okay, maybe viruses are bigger than proteins. Okay, so proteins are smaller than viruses. Maya. Yeah, there's a whole question of like, are viruses alive or not? And I've asked myself this question quite a bit, and I basically have come to the conclusion so far, at least, that they are like a planaria. Like a planaria is like a virus almost of, but at like couple levels up in the periodicity of sentience, or and um, or in bot periodicity. But it's not really bot periodicity. It's outside of bot periodicity almost, because bot periodicity deals in the levels of sentient, coherent beings, like an organism. Or like, you could say, a, like a caste would be sentient, whereas a corporation is not. So a corporation is not linked to structures below. It's like outside of it entirely almost. It's like they're behaving cooperatively, the individuals in a corporation, but they're not. It's not like the corporation exists for the sake of the families of and then the organisms of those families, and then the cells of those organisms, and the molecules of those cells, and the atoms of those molecules, etc. A caste is different, because there is a unified there is a it's like what is good for one organism in a caste is good for all organisms in a caste. What's good for soldiers is good for soldiers. What's good for cops is good for cops. What's good for doctors is good for doctors. What's good for Coca-Cola is not necessarily good for workers. Okay? That's the difference. But sometimes they're aligned, and when they are, form cooperative assemblies that are not unified into a singular sentience. But when feeling is aligned, you get singular sentience. So if something is bad for a doctor, it's bad for doctors. Okay? If it's bad for nurses, it's bad for nurses. If it's good for elected officials, it's good for elected officials. And they feel it all together. Because I feel if I'm a nurse or if I'm a cop and something happens that's good for me because I'm a cop, all other cops also feel essentially this singular feeling of that's good for me or that's bad for me. That's not true of a corporation or a company. What's good for the company is not always good for the workers of that company. It depends on what kind of worker you are, and also it depends on what it is that is being impacted. Some things are bad for all workers, like working in an office 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That is bad for human beings. It's bad for families. It's bad for the organisms of those families. Therefore, it is bad for also the cells of those organisms, the molecules of those cells, and the atoms of those molecules. It is bad for us to work in an office all day long, 5 days a week. Same thing with school for children. It's the same exact thing. It's very bad for families. It undermines parents to send children to school for 8 hours a day to be taught by somebody else. It's the outsourcing of parenting. And it undermines husbands and wives to have them working in an office away from each other all day long and unable to actually help each other. And then they're only together when they're exhausted at the end of the day, which is not, you're usually too tired to even need somebody at that point. It's just terrible. It's undermining of the family. That's not true of like caste impacts. So what is good for artists, the artisan caste essentially, is good for the people who are the families of the people who are artists and or artisans, and also their cells and etc. etc. It's a unified unification of feeling, or singularity of feeling is what causes a sentient singularity. And it kind of alternates because you have like castes do collectively feel, they feel individuals, the caste feels via individuals, even if it doesn't feel every single individual. And then the level above that unites totally. So you have like individuals do not feel as well as families feel. They literally do not feel as unified as families feel. That's why individuals are much more self-destructive than families, because families can tell when things are bad and good, and individuals have a much harder time doing that. Like that's why if you don't have family and it's much easier to become self-destructive, because there isn't the context of feelings that would otherwise keep you from just devolving into like hedonistic selfishness that is also destructive. Okay, let's see. What time is it? It's 9. Okay, so I'm well past the time. I'm gonna go once I answer all these questions. Ask any final questions. I'll make sure I got them all. Do you think that however many, the 4 or 5 surviving population, is it safe to say? I mean, there could be tree-dwelling vegetarian tuatara, but there aren't any. However, there is the South American iguana. Yeah, exactly. They're the same thing. Like they might not genetically be of the same, lineage, but they are the same structure. Like a lizard is a lizard at that size, like an agomid or an iguanid that's like 2 feet. Like that is there's a reason why tuataras have the same exact body structure as like an Australian water dragon. You don't know what I'm talking about. Torin does in the chat, but they're just two lizards that one of them is a lizard, one of them is not. They look the same. Tuatara is not a lizard. Actually, it's its own reptile group. It's very, very old, very ancient. But it looks phenotypically the same as, water dragon, which is basically an iguana. And they're found all over the world. How many years ago was the age of Leo? 12,000, probably. Probably several rulers had their head carved there until it was whittled down to that. It's probably lion head, and then it was whittled into a human. It was almost certainly a lion. Like there are a lot of depictions of pharaohs in Egyptian art, in Egyptian stone art. Like and it's not they're not lions. Like they don't have lion bodies. They have human bodies. Everywhere. Look. Human. 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 It's like there's no other instances of a lion body. It was just a really impressive thing. I mean, I guess there's that. But that could have been made because of the Sphinx. Yes, Sphinx. I mean, I'm not for sure, but I'm pretty confident that like that was like look guys, look at the um is it the head to body ratio here. Like this is much more accurate. You're telling me that they could do this, but like they couldn't do it with like the most grandiose construction project other than the Great Pyramids it would have been, at least if they had made it. Like why can they keep, you know, proportionality in that Sphinx but not in the Sphinx? You would think. I mean, and they were very, like, their proportionality is pretty good. Like they are very good. The Egyptians were very talented. They were not like, I'm talking about the Egyptians, not like the preceding civilization. Like look at how good they were at their proportions. They're their art was amazing. And you're telling me they just biffed it with the Sphinx like horribly? I don't think so. Like that's good proportions. I wonder Like, I don't think that I would think that the Sphinx is much older than those. Not saying the head is much older, but the body is probably much older than anything that is Egyptian. I think they found the pyramids. There's this video of Nassim Haramein and in Peru, and he's showing something so funny, and it's like he's showing these huge megalithic structures that are just giant blocks of granite that were literally moved from a quarry on the other side of the valley that are they're literally they look immovable, and they're so big, and they were just aligned perfectly, and you could tell something happened where earthquake or something, they were moved, and then they were patched with just like little rocks like this big. And he was like, archaeologists think that the same people that did that, and he pointed to like the patchwork of like little stones, are the same ones that made this structure, and it was like 40 foot tall, perfectly carved slabs of granite. And I sat back and I was just like, it's a really good point. That doesn't make any sense. You're telling me they could move those rocks and sculpt them perfectly from the other side of the valley to where they were, but their repairs, they couldn't just like push it back to where it was. They had to repair it with like bricks that they, hit with, shaped into kind of brick shape with a rock, essentially just like smacking another rock. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And I think the same thing is true of ancient Egypt. I don't think the people that carved that head on top of the Sphinx are the same people that carved that body. Like, look, they were so good. The proportions are like legit in every single other instance. And except if it was, stylistic, which would mean it would probably be a larger head than normal. I think you're right about the Amazon jungle general area. Why do you think this pyramid was not buried, disassembled, or built over like many of the others? I think that it was just co-opted, and it's in the middle of the desert. It's not in the middle of a forest. The forest just can overtake, and plants are the masters of rock. Like, they are they. You ever seen what a tree can do to like concrete? It'll destroy it. Um, it just takes a while. So, I mean, if there's no trees around, then there's nothing that's going to happen to those pyramids other than like, you know, wind erosion. Do you have some New York attitude? I have New York attitude. I am completely New York attitude. I would not be able to do this if I didn't have New York attitude. I would be way too worried about how I was being perceived instead of being more worried about getting my point across with any of this work. My whole thing, my mom's side of the family is Brooklyn. My dad is not, but my entire family, for the most part, uh, is straight up. For the most part, almost most of them have like that. Is more Brooklyn than like upstate New York, for sure. I don't know what Jojo Mago Magoo is to have the artistic talents of hunter. I don't know what that is. New York is cool in some ways. It is cool in some ways. When I used to want to live in Manhattan, I do not anymore. I don't even want to. I used to want to live in downtown Los Angeles. It smells like urine. Every time I go there now, I'm just disgusted. It's not a. There's nothing. There, all those things that make a city cool. By the way, like the cool things about the city that make young people want to move there. Those are sexy things. Those are not beautiful things. There are beautiful aspects of cities, but they are not things that you experience. Like they're not. You don't go to those beautiful things in the cities. Like you can just. It's just that the city itself has beauty and architecturally and things like that. It's but like hip restaurants, anything that's hip and like I don't know what's another word for like hip. Um, like in like trendy. That's a good way of putting it. Like anything trendy, those trendy restaurants that pop up and disappear every like 3 years in the middle of every big city. Those are sexy and they don't last. And their appeal also does not last. The appeal of having a beautiful view and living on a hill is always beautiful. But the appeal of living in like a studio apartment above, you know, a hole in the wall restaurant and like having a trendy bar, down the way that I don't know has like fish in it or something like that. There's a bar called Fish here in LA and it's got like fish tanks everywhere, which is actually pretty cool, but like that's because I like fish and not because I think it's like cool, trendy. And like that loses its appeal. Like I will not go to the bar Fish, the club here in LA, Fish, ever again. And even though it has cool fish tanks, like I'll go somewhere else where there's just fish tanks and not all like the clubness. And it's all these trendy things, like they're usually associated with a time in your life where sexiness is normal. It's like late teens through your 30s. It's like that's when you go out. That's when you know, I don't know. That's also like prime mating time. That's the time of sexiness. And then people have midlife crises where they realize like they're not as sexy anymore. They get Mazda Miatas. Sidewalks are so dirty and covered in grime. Everything has a layer of dust on it. Paint is chipped away. There's erosion all in LA. Yeah, it's disgusting. It literally smells like urine everywhere. I hate it. Every time I have to go downtown, it's such a chore at this point. And when it used to be interesting, and now it's not interesting anymore. It's just sad and it just gross. Get out of the cities. That is like my message. Uh, I don't live in downtown LA, so it's not where I live. It is very pretty. I live in probably the best place in LA County that you could live, but it's not like Beverly Hills or anything. But it's better than Beverly Hills. It's not as expensive, but it's like more normal. Um, Beverly Hills is not nice unless you want to buy something that's very expensive or you have a gigantic mansion and it's nice in your mansion, but it's not night. Beverly Hills is not like nice to just go for a walk and, you know, participate in, I don't know, basketball at the park or something. Could there be a mirror underneath the pyramid? Pyramid underneath? Yeah, could be. the ultimate sensory deprivation chamber. Also, according to science, there were multiple chambers within the Sphinx, at least until the 70s, but then suddenly that has never been the case. Yeah, I don't know. I think remember that archaeology is just as lost as every other field in today. And if you don't know how lost the scientific fields are, they are as lost as politics. Look at the state of politics. That is the exact level that that is the state of the scientific establishment as well. It is all one system. The political establishment is the scientific establishment, and if you don't know the scientific establishment, just look at politics. It's just as nonsensical. At this point, they just hide it by telling you about, Schrodinger's cat, which they don't understand. You can't be dead and alive at the same time. That's just a fact. It's literally impossible. This experiment is being described, but this thought experiment is being described by people that don't understand it at this point. It's not that the cat is dead. It's that the cat is simultaneously an assembly. It is simultaneously a bunch of cells and an organism of a cat, and simultaneously a bunch of molecules and an assembly of cells, and simultaneously a bunch of atoms and an assembly of molecules. That's what it is. It's not that it's just alive and dead at the same time. There is no alive and dead. It's just that there is the perspective that of sentience, the sentient perspective, and then there is the perspective of inanimate. And but with a cat, it's basically almost all animate. But if it's dead, then it's a dead organism. It's not a. It's if the cat is dead, then it's not an organism anymore. But it's still a clump of cells. But it's not a unified assembly anymore. Or it's a dying assembly. But that's what it is. It's not that it's alive and dead at the same time. That's it's an oversimplification to the point of just like destroying the idea. It's literally useless to think about that. It's like, oh, it's possible. There's the universe is probabilistic, and there's possibilities, and the cat is alive and dead at the same time. No, it's that it exists in a superposition structure. Is what it is. This thing that I have right here, I have this because it's called Connectrica, and it allows me to explain the concept of superposition. It also looks like my cosmological verse and a fiber bundle at the same time. And a helical structure through the center. It's literally a great model of the universe. And it's also gold, which symbolizes eternity. So if I ask you a question, and I asked you, do you see the square? Yes. Do you see the squares, multiple? Yes. So this is a superposition of singularity, single square, and multiplicity, many squares, an assembly. It's a dynamic structure, and it is a helix. It's actually a double helix because it's two spirals going opposite directions. One is coming from the top inward, and one's from the bottom. They meet right there. So, do you see the square? Yes. The squares? Yes. The double helix? Yes. And oh man, there's one more. The wave. Okay, it's a wave, right? Gotta get it going. It's a wave. You see the wave? So you see the wave and the double helix and the square and the squares. The four primary perspectives of a connectrica is a single square, multiple squares, a wave, and a double helix, which is a double spiral, a two-directional spiral. That's also true of the universe. Everything is a particle. It is also an assembly of particles. It is also a wave, and it is also a two-directional information spiral that's self-referencing, which is a double helix. Just like that. That's also the cat. The cat is a double helix, DNA, and the mathematics even below that. So mathematics is a double helix. So is DNA, and then so is a blockchain. That's the final helical structure in the triality of helical structures. So we have one more to go. But the shape of math, what is the shape of math? It is a double helix. That's the shape of math. It's a fiber bundle, and if you're looking at it from the inside out, it's a double helix, and if you're looking at it from the outside in, it's a singular quantum, essentially single unit. So that's the cat, though. The cat is a wave. Every time you move, it's a wave of cells moving. Synchronicity is in a synchronized form. You're also a multiplicity of cells. You're also a single organism, and you're also a double helix with DNA. That is what Schrodinger's cat is about. It is not about cat being alive and dead at the same time. It is about a sentient structure existing in superposition states. And there are 4 states, objectively, always. And they are alternating. Wave is an objective spiral. It is the quantum spiraling. And then there is the helical structure, which is the internal subjective perspective of the quantum spiraling. That's why when you look at a seashell, it looks like it's a wave, basically. It's like a wave structure. It literally looks like a crashing wave on the outside, but if you x-ray it, you see that it's literally like it is a helical structure internally. It's a spiral, because it's mirroring the structure of reality. And so the wave structure and the helical chain structure are 2 sides of one coin. And then you also have the singularity and multiplicity aspect of this, which are not really 2 sides of one coin, but they are like the levels of currency, essentially. It's like $1 is made of quarters. Quarters are made of, nickels and dimes, and nickels and dimes are made of pennies, and like that's a different. It's the what's it called, like discretization of structure, which is like singularity and assembly, or the many and the one, like that. But the cat is simultaneously many and one, aka dead and alive, and it's also wave and also of motion and decay, and it's also a generative structure through a helical chain, self-referencing information. That is the structure of everything. The universe, you, atoms, that, everything follows that pattern. This has turned into a long stream. I'm actually liking it. I'll go for 15 more minutes because it's a good one. I'm exhausted, but this is a really good stream. Really actually turned out to have a lot of cohesion, which is more than most, and it was the one stream that I didn't want. I was like, it's open, and it turns out to be like pretty focused. Whereas like the other ones, I try and be focused, and then we end up talking about everything else. It's the way it goes. The cat's body dissipates after it permanently loses consciousness. Yes. It decays, it falls apart, it loses the cells in the assembly start to die because they're no longer cared for by the king, which would be the cat. That's true of also the molecules and the atoms as well, but it just takes way, way longer. Usually. Maybe a tooth is left if a nail or chipmunk doesn't eat it for the calcium. Yeah, the tooth isn't even left. Eventually the tooth decays. Like, because the molecules decay. Like, molecules do not they decay. They just, it's like plant, you wouldn't know a plant was alive or dying. I have a plant over there. I water it every now and then, not enough, and it's dying. And I've noticed, and it's been dying for a long time. I'm going to try and bring it back. We'll see if I can. But both of those directions, growing and dying, or growth and decay is a better way of putting it. It's growth and decay. Those two structures or 2 degrees of freedom happen very slowly for plants compared to animals. They happen even faster though for societal structures than they do for organisms, and than they do for and families grow and decay faster than organisms. So you grow a family overnight. You get married, and maybe that's the growth of a family. Then you have children, it grows the family even more. You have another kid, it grows the family even more. And this all takes place in less than a human life. And in a very small portion of a human life, actually. The amount of time that passes between getting married and having your last kid is like 10 years at max, about, probably. So that's not even close to the majority of a human life. Families grow and they split apart like that. I mean, all decay of families happens very, very quickly. Everybody who has seen divorce knows that. And also, just any family that's fallen apart. It falls apart faster than an organism. An organism grows and falls apart faster than a molecule. A molecule grows and falls apart faster than an atom, and so on and so forth. Like the casts are even faster at growth and faster at decay than families, because they're subject to incentives and impacts that are much more momentary. War. Yeah, war can wipe out a family, but a family isn't just man. When I say family, I mean a lineage structure. I don't just mean like parents and children. I mean parents and children and their parents and their parents and their parents and their parents and their parents. It is, you are the tip of the spear of a chain. You're just the last link so far. And that entire chain is the family. So that goes back ways away to the first organism. I mean, it goes really back to God, because it goes past the first organism to cells, to molecules, etc., etc. At least there is a lineage that is there, always, that you could go backwards. But it every single successive stacked layer or period in the periodicity of consciousness or life is quicker to grow and quicker to decay than the preceding one. So this is actually interesting, by the way. It is Hanukkah tonight. Did not light the menorah yet, but our candles are very quick, so it's okay. But here, look at this. I'm gonna go in 10 minutes, definitely. Okay, I don't have that here actually. Let's see here. Bingo. Cool. Hanukkah is about originally it is thought of as, and not originally, it is traditionally, usually, I'll say not traditionally even, usually it is thought of as a holiday that celebrates a resistance to tyranny, and because the Maccabees were a group of Jews who were resisting tyranny when the temple was sacked and they didn't have enough oil to light the menorah for a day, for more than a day, but the oil lasted, and they said it was a miracle, lasted 8 days, and that is now where the menorah comes from, which is this, what we light on Hanukkah. People say, oh, some people will say Hanukkah is the Jewish Christmas, and then other people will say it's not the Jewish Christmas. Don't even call it the Jewish Christmas. That's insulting. It's not insulting. It is the Jewish Christmas. It's just also other things. But everything with God or objectivity, just like you are more than just an organism, you are also the tip of a lineage structure, and you are also an assembly of cells and an assembly of molecules and an assembly of atoms and an assembly of hadrons. That's also true of everything in theological traditions. There's multiple levels. So there's the level of resistance to tyranny in the story of the Maccabees, but this is also a tree of light, the menorah. It's literally a tree of light. You light it, has candles. You know what else is a tree of light that's celebrated towards the end of the year? This bad boy right here. Tree of light. Why are these both celebrated with a tree of light? Because they symbolize, on a deeper level, the tree of life. So you have, I don't like any of these pictures of a Christmas tree. Let's see here. By the way, look, it's even spirals with garlands. You have the star at the top, singularity, and then you have growth from there. And also you could say, oh, pointing towards there, but also growing from there outward. And it's a tree of light, literally, decorated with ornaments like organisms, geckos, elements, molecules, whatever, different kinds of cells. They're like ornaments. And then you have garlands, which are basically like the helical structure. And it's a tree of light. It's the It's the subjective perspective of the tree of life. It's this perspective from the top down. That looks like a Christmas tree. Then you also have from the center out perspective. Okay? Like this. Center out perspective. From the center out. Tree of life. Tree of light. That is also the meaning, the deeper meaning behind both of these structures. And the idea that it was, it should have burned out, but it didn't because of a miracle, is also due to what Eric Weinstein calls the twin nuclei problem. It is that it looks like we are dooming ourselves with our own technology, but because we unite into a sentient singularity at the end, it allows us for the cycle to repeat and restart again, make another universe, essentially. So if it wasn't for this black swan event to come, that is an ascension process, which is much more dependent on choice than it is just like, I guess, math input, like zeros and ones, and like basically adaptation is. Every time you go from a cell to an organism, that's an ascension. Or you go from a molecule to a cell, that's an ascension. From an organism to a sentient singularity or universal singularity. This is the menorah. It's also this. Hadron is an assembly of quarks is a hadron. An assembly of hadrons is an atom. Assembly of atoms is a molecule. Assembly of molecules is a cell. Assembly of cells is an organism. Assembly of organisms is a family or lineage. Assembly of families is a caste, and assembly of castes is technology. You can also look at it like this. An atom of hadrons, a cell of molecules, a family of organisms, technology of castes. It's 4, but it's also 8, just like the pyramid, Great Pyramid. And this is the same thing. A universal singularity is an assembly of information and energy. Cell is an assembly of molecules. Molecule is an assembly of atoms. An atom is an assembly of hadrons. Hadron is an assembly of quarks. Technology is an assembly of castes. Castes is an assembly of families. Family is an assembly of organisms. Organism is an assembly of cells. It's the tree of life. It's the 2 different perspectives of the tree of life. Here's your Christmas tree perspective, essentially, because that's it right there. Here's your menorah perspective. We think that the people of the past were so ignorant. We are only now rediscovering much of what they knew. Happy Hanukkah. Also, the dreidel is an upside down pine tree. Yes, it is. Here's the dreidel. This is a dreidel. It's basically like a die or dice, but it's 4-sided. So it's the 4 primary perspectives. And you spin it. This is a titanium dreidel. I had a guy anodize this for me, and he was selling titanium dreidels, and I was like, I'll buy one of those from you if you can anodize it green, which is it's a very difficult color to anodize. It's the most difficult color to anodize titanium, and he was able to do it. This isn't even the nicer one, but they weren't that expensive. They were like $20. But I needed a dreidel for Hanukkah, and I didn't have one. This is the best dreidel I've ever had. But this is a shin which you give half of whatever you have, like half of your, gelt it's called, which is like whatever. It's like your pot of like gold or currency or whatever value. It's a pot of value. This is a hay, which is means you get half from the pot in the center. If you get shin, you give half of what you have towards the pot. You get gimel, you get everything from the pot, and if you get nun, you get none from the pot. And it is the 4 primary perspectives basically, and it spins. It's better. It's more fascinating than a die. It's a dice, Roman dice, Jewish dreidel. That's very, very Hanukkah right there. But my wife got me this in Rome, and it's interesting that this spins and has 4, and then the die, it's like it's almost like the addition of the 2 sides. It just changes the how it interacts with you and everything. I'm just thinking about like it orienting, like you orienting it and it orienting versus this orienting. In Sentient Singularity Theory, there's 4 primary perspectives: inside, outside, separate, and oneness. And then it splits into 6 from there. And it's oneness splits into oneness within, oneness without, and singularity. And so you have oneness within, oneness without, singularity, reflecting across singularity. Then you also have inside and outside, reflecting across separateness, essentially. And separateness and singularity are basically the same thing. Something that is separate is singular. It's self-contained. So is something that is separate. Maya, stop. My dog is itching or something. It's funny, chess has like 64, I think, squares, and Go, Chinese Go, has 81, I think. And my universe model has 64 gaps when you split the cosmological verse into the 3 different states of matter. There's 64 gaps in entanglement, and then there's those 64 gaps separate 81 quanta of consciousness, essentially. And it's interesting that this east-west type of mentality is so reflective. You have their theological traditions, very subjective, almost very not focused on a hierarchy, focused on the universality from the center out. But then there's this Western Abrahamic theological tradition, which is like from the top down, hierarchical. You need both. And you see that in my same exact structure in my what I think is a Calabi-Yau manifold, but it's I call it the binary triody. So it would be like PEMDAS, the order of operations in mathematics, the primary and secondary colors. These are binary triadies. And you see a top-down perspective and from the center out. Same thing with the quarks. The three masculine and three feminine quarks are same thing. There's a hierarchy of an increasing of force of mass from the top quarks and the up quarks and down quarks down to the truth and beauty quarks. But then also you have this center out perspective. It's like that which is strange and it's like the up quark and the truth quark reflect across the charm quark. So that which you look up to and that which is like, trustworthy, I guess. That's what the truth is, if it's anything. It's charming. And like something is not charming unless it's like winning you over. Meaning it's like getting you to trust it. And then you have the down quark and the beauty quark reflecting across the strange quark. And then so that which is, I guess you could say, down and beautiful, or like below you is really what it is. It's that which is below you, and beautiful is strange, which is also like attractive. And if you're a man and you're thinking about how you relate to women, that makes a lot of sense. And if you're a woman and you thinking about how you relate to men, the previous one probably makes a lot of sense. And it's funny. It's just so funny to me how much the establishment tries to avoid consciousness being part of physics, like really part of physics, like not part of observing physics, but like part of physics itself, and like part of what you are observing physically, and an aspect of that which you are observing physically, and not just an aspect of your observation. And yet it is literally everywhere. It's unavoidable. That's why every conversation about quantum physics turns into a conversation about consciousness. Every single one. It's without fail. If it goes on for more than 15 minutes, it's going to turn into a conversation about consciousness. And it's because physics is the constraints and degrees of freedom of consciousness. That is exactly what physics is. And that's why it always turns to a conversation about consciousness, because it is consciousness. All right. I hope you have a great Hanukkah. That would ruin them. Okay, I'm calling it. It is 10:08. Thank you very much, guys. Please hit the like button. Share this with people who you think would find it meaningful. If you would like to join our Discord community, which is a great community, it really is, and we host a live call for many hours. It's very long. It's like 5 hours sometimes, every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. If you would like to join that, send me a private message on Instagram. Also, go to sentientsingularity.com, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and please sign up for my email list, because they're going to censor me on here. I have a plan, but it's a long-term plan, and they might censor me short-term. Tomorrow, I am having a friend, at least the plan is to have a friend of mine on here, Andrew Meyer. He is a living meme. He was the guy who was tased when he asked John Kerry about being in the same Skull and Bones community as George Bush during the Bush-Kerry elections. And he was like, "Don't tase me, bro." And that became like a meme. That is him. So, but he is very passionate about Kabbalah, and I don't looked that deeply into Kabbalah, but I've looked enough to notice that it is basically quantum mechanics with morality included, and which is basically where we're going in science, I guess. What does Kurt Scheimongel call it? A Weltschauung. It's like a all-encompassing worldview, the way that you should behave, what you believe, and I forgot the other part of it. It'd be like what you should think, what you should say, how you should act, essentially. And that is where we're going with quote unquote science. And so I thought it was a good idea for Hanukkah to have my friend Andrew on here, and we're going to talk about Kabbalah and see where it lines up with Sentient Singularity Theory and quantum physics, morality, I guess the next gen morality that comes from this type of work. And because if everything is about consciousness and it's all about the constraints and degrees of freedom of consciousness, and that's what physics is, it is impossible to avoid the next step, which is we have to start talking about morals, because those are constraints and degrees of freedom that are as real as the constraints and degrees of freedom that in what we currently call physics. They are as real. You cannot violate them, or else you will decay into chaos. So, all right, with that, God bless. Thank you, everyone. And I will see you tomorrow. Peace.